Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Miha and welcome to the channel. Before we get into today's topic, I want to thank you all for the feedback. Many of you have emailed me ideas on how to improve the channel and further ideas for topics. I did make sure that the text in the lab section is bigger and clearer and easier to read. I also want to thank you for the topic suggestions, including videos on the state of the AI industry, particularly how it's impacting jobs, and reaching out to others in the field, particularly entrepreneurs who are developing really cool applications. So I'll be working on that and hopefully rolling out videos with those topics in the future. In today's video, we will explore how AI can help us prepare for difficult conversations through role-playing. In the video today, we will use an example of a conversation around compensation, specifically asking for a raise, but you can use the strategy for anything. You can role play difficult conversations with your board, with senior leadership, your city council, constituents, customers, really anybody who you think you will have a conversation with that might be a little bit challenging and where you really want to prepare. And this isn't about reading a script. It's about practicing adaptability so that when you do have that real conversation, you feel more confident and you're better prepared. In this video, you will see me dictating prompts rather than typing them out. I hope that will make the video more accessible because you will hear me speak out the prompt and you will also see the prompt text on the screen. I will also be reading select responses from our negotiating counterpart, so the role play that AI will be doing. And I will do this because I prefer to read out those responses because in my head, then I hear the person who I'll have a conversation with speaking, but you do not need to do that. If you prefer, however, you can activate voice mode and have a real-time conversation with AI. That way you hear the response instead of having to read it. I would say pick whichever strategy feels more natural to you and will be more beneficial for you to prepare for that difficult conversation. Let's jump into the lab and see how we can set this up in ChatGPT. All right, let's get started. Now, for today's demonstration, we will be using ChatGPT 5. This was recently released, so we're going to use this as an opportunity to put it through its paces. I'm using the standard settings on GPT-5. So before we start, let's give AI a little bit of context what we'll be doing. Also, instead of typing the prompts this time, I will be using the dictate option. This way you hear me think through the prompts and you'll see them written out. So hopefully that will help make it easier to follow the video. Let's begin. Today, I will ask you to role play my manager as I am preparing to ask for a raise. Now, before we begin this role plays, give me 3 questions that you would like me to answer that will help you role play my manager more realistically. All right, so here's the prompt. Now, let's see what kind of recommendations ChatGPT gives us in terms of the data and the information it could use to role play our manager more effectively. So I'd like to know a little bit about our budget, a little bit about relationship and evaluation styles. Okay, makes sense. Let's give it a little bit more information about this manager and our organization. So you will role play my manager at a mid-sized nonprofit organization. Our budget is constrained and raises are limited. This seems to be the norm in many nonprofits. You are a risk-averse leader. You're focused on fairness, and you are careful not to set precedents that you don't like. We worked together for 2.5 years, and we have a positive working relationship, but you always want evidence of impact for any decision that anybody puts before you. You are also open to conversations and discussions, but you can be firm. Please respond as realistically as possible when I ask for the raise. I will begin the conversation. Now, I explicitly said I will begin the conversation at the end because I know in many of these situations, you call for a meeting, you sit down, and your boss says, well, what would you like to ask me? So let's make sure that we begin the conversation and we're put in that often awkward position of asking. Thank you for taking the time for meeting with me today. I would like to have a conversation today about my compensation because I think I deserve a raise. I know this is not the most effective opening, but I want to give us something to work with. So here we go. Let's see how our manager responds. Well, appreciates our directness, but you're aware we're under tight budgets. All right. Can you walk me through the specifics? All right. So here is the leader asking for that impact, that proof. Now, before we continue, let's think about this opening. This was clearly not the most effective way to start the conversation. So what you can do in these type of role-playing exercises is pause it and ask for recommendations and then start again to practice better openings. Let's do that now. Pause the role-play exercise. Can you give me an analysis of my opening? What could I have done better and what worked? Give me some ideas of how I could start this conversation more effectively. Let's see what the recommendations are. So remember, the role play is paused right now. And here's what we did well. We were direct as a professional tone. We were polite and we had good framing, right? I would like to have a conversation rather than I demand a raise. What could be improved? Evidence up front, right? Positioning, I think I deserve, may be subjective because who knows what the boss thinks, or well, everybody might think they need a raise. And tone of timing, you framed it in the context of contributions over time, but maybe we need to link this a little bit clearer. Some stronger openings are suggested here. So let's restart this and use one of these stronger openings to see if the response is going to be different. For the sake of this demonstration, I will go with option 3, the collaborative approach. I appreciate you taking the time to meet. I want to discuss my compensation. Over the past 2 years, I have been proud to help increase donations by 25% and deepen our donor pool. I believe this merits consideration for a raise, and I would like to hear your perspective as we discuss what might be possible. All right, so that's clearly a much more collaborative approach than what I opened with initially. Now let's continue the role play. And here is my first mistake. I did not tell it that we are continuing the role play. So let's try that again. And I will use the unpolished version that it recommended above. Continue role play. I appreciate you taking time to meet. I want to discuss my compensation. Over the past 2 years, I have been proud to help increase our donations by 25% and deepen our donor pool. I believe this merits consideration for a raise, and I would like to hear your perspective as we discuss what might be possible. This time, AI knows that we want to continue the role play exercise. I hear you. I'm going to acknowledge that those results are significant. So clear acknowledgement of our results. And now here is the pushback, right? About our budget, a pushback around fairness, pushback about precedence, which is exactly what we asked it to do. I'm further to open discussion. Can you help me understand how your contributions? All right, now let's push back. Let's say that we really want this raise, and we also believe that our peers in other organizations are getting paid more. So let's open with that. I've done some research and looked at what my peers earn in other organizations. I can see that they make considerably more than I do. This is why I believe that a salary increase from $65,000 to $75,000 is fair, especially given my contributions over the past few years. So let's see how our manager responds to this type of a push. So it actually recognized that 65 to 75,000 is a significant raise. That's well over 10%. And then, that said, I don't want to dismiss Jirka. So now we're talking about benchmarks using this comparison, right? So now this person wants more detail. Remember, this is what we told it that our manager does. They always want that detail, the data. They want actionable information. Now, what if we were to become hostile and we get defensive? Let's see what happens now. Well, I did my research on Indeed and other online forums, and I know those numbers are accurate. I really think that I deserve this raise. Otherwise, I think I might look for other opportunities elsewhere. Again, probably not the most effective negotiating strategy. We just want to see how AI reacts when we push back more aggressively. Again, pushing back, right? But also noting that, we can't simply jump up to $75,000. So what I can do is take this request along with market data and bring it to into our broader compensation discussion. So maybe there's other things that we could do, right? Maybe professional development. So let's see what happens if we do this. Well, if we cannot increase my salary, can we then consider increasing my professional development budget, perhaps allowing me to participate in additional training that would allow me to pick up new skills. Or perhaps you can help me find opportunities for leadership roles in our organization. So we're trying to compromise. Maybe we're taking a step back from the brink. Here's what we can get, right? Is willing to commit to some professional development and finding some leadership opportunities. Still a bit vague, but it is giving us an opening. Now, what if we went the nuclear option and we said, well, if you're not giving me this, I'm going to quit. I appreciate the position you're in, but if we can't come to a compromise here and you can offer me something specific for professional development, at least a dollar amount and some initial compensation increase, I think I might just quit. Again, this is probably not the most effective way to have this conversation, but we're just seeing what happens if we push this defensive manager into a corner. Right? So clearly recognizing how serious you are, right? Now saying I cannot improve this raise, but here's what I can offer, right? So now we're getting some numbers, right? We're pushing this leader into a corner. Again, this is not the most effective negotiating strategy. I just want to show you that you can push AI in this type of role-playing situations into a corner. Now, let's take a step back and let's ask AI to analyze this short back and forth we've had. Pause role-play exercise. Please give me an analysis of my engagement with this boss. Give me the strengths and give me areas of improvements from my negotiation strategy. What could I do to improve and get the outcomes that I want? And this, I think, is where AI really shines. You can have this type of role-playing exercises with your friends and your peers, but AI can, process a lot of this data very quickly and give you specific ideas for improvement and highlight what you do well. Right. So we have strengths that were evidence-based. We did a market comparison. We're assertive, so we clearly know what we want. But here's areas for improvement, right? We escalated this way too quickly. I know that was by design. Framing the market data, we could have done that better for sure. And, we were clearly asking for a very large a salary increase, right? Perhaps asking for something smaller may have been more meaningful, or creating a range where we could then have some negotiations. And here are some recommendations. Now, here's what else we could do, right? We don't know which direction this could go. What if our boss gets very aggressive? And we could start this conversation again by saying, let's restart this role play exercise. This time you're very aggressive. Or perhaps we know that our boss really needs us to stay at this job. So we could restart this exercise and say, our boss will be very accommodating because they really need me in this role. So you could play out multiple scenarios. In fact, we could ask AI to create different scenarios based on these criteria. So let's do that now, because those scenarios could be a useful way to prepare for these type of difficult conversations. Could you please create 3 or 4 different scenarios of how this conversation could go with my boss? Imagine that my boss is having a bad day, and so it could be more confrontational. Or imagine that my boss could really understand or appreciate me and want me to stay in this role. How might this conversation go in that sense? For each scenario, give me a sample of the kinds of dialogue that could occur. So now we're really asking AI to just have this whole conversation back and forth with itself. We could have explicitly asked that and say, hey, have this back and forth with me as a fly on a wall. But here we actually asked it to create a few scenarios. Now, these are going to be fairly short because this conversation was short. But if you spend 15, 20 minutes talking to AI, these scenarios will, of course, also be longer since it will have more information to deal with. Now, it does not necessarily mean, of course, that your conversation will go exactly as these scenarios outlined, but I do think they give you some idea on what you could see. And these are all things that are powerful in helping you prepare for these type of difficult conversations. Now, let's assume that we don't know what mood our boss will be in when we have this conversation and what position they will take. We could ask AI to help us make a decision tree, kind of an if-then set of statements or strategies that we can use to prepare. I don't know what mood my boss will be in when we have this conversation. Can you please create a decision tree, a set of if and then statements that will help me prepare and guide me through this type of a conversation so that I'm ready no matter which direction the conversation goes? Here's a couple of recommendations. We've got different openings, right? Depending on what the boss will be like. And then, of course, fallback options if things fail. Again, this is short because we had only a short exchange here. It was just 2 or 3 back and forth questions. But if you have a longer conversation with AI on this, you will get a much more detailed discussion tree. Finally, can you please create a short cheat sheet with me, something I can use to prepare, include the general advice on these type of negotiations on salaries so that I can prepare over the next week? So here is a final request for AI just to give us an overview and to pull in tips and recommendations that maybe we haven't discussed yet. And this could be something could be useful to help you prepare for these type of conversations, which are often difficult. So this is a quick example of how you can use AI to role play a difficult conversation. In this video, which we explored how to set up a role play exercise. Again, you can do this for any kind of difficult conversation. It does not have to be around compensation. And you can also expand this role play into all kinds of different directions. For example, you could ask ChatGPT to reverse roles. This type of a role reversal role playing exercise, you would be the manager and you would ask AI to try to convince you for a raise. Maybe that perspective would give you new insights on how to approach this type of a conversation. You can also set up an escalation where you ask AI that with every response, it becomes more defensive. And that way you can practice de-escalating or leading a conversation into a different direction if that is warranted. You can also practice time-sensitive discussions. Let's say your manager is under a lot of time constraints and you know you have only 5 minutes to get your point across. You could tell AI to end the conversation after 5 minutes or perhaps after 5 written exchanges. And that way you can practice delivering your point succinctly. You could even set it up as a third-party observer where you tell AI, this is what my counterpart thinks like, here are my notes, and ask it to have a back and forth on its own. And you observe the conversation and take notes. And you can also ask AI to give you advice for nonverbal communication that might be useful in the particular scenarios that you are exploring. And no matter what strategy you take, just remember that the goal here is not to generate a script that you will stick to, but rather it's to practice, just as you might with a peer who helps you prepare for difficult conversations. If you found this video interesting, consider giving it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.